It is very difficult in a sense that we must understand that the norm has changed now that some leaders of the Highlands, it is no longer you, it is when you become a leader when you have weapons, things that you can force yourself to become a leader. Trying to get ourselves into those areas, it's pretty difficult. Most times we face resistance.
So you are saying that the leaders themselves are arming their people up there?
Right down to village level.
Vocabulary?
Where is the ammunition coming from?
From cities, sir.
Cities?
From Port Moresby.
Because it was guns that were in the hands of some of these communities that were being used to determine the outcome of the elections. But as you so rightly, as you know in your business, those guns don't just wait for the elections. In between, they are being used to, I guess, determine all kinds of agendas, not just election outcomes. Your security forces, which we have taken on board, tell us that we are essentially waiting for a disaster in 2027 if we do not deal with some of these issues, firearms being, I think almost at the top of the list and firearms and ammunition, as you correctly put it. So.
Welcome back, everyone. Today, we're diving into the Special Parliamentary Committee on the 2022 general election, focusing on the critical issue of firearm use during the election. Join us as committee members Han, Keith Iduhu, Sir Puka, Temu, and Chairman Allan discuss their findings and the key measures needed to ensure a safer 2027 election. If you enjoy this content, don't forget to like, subscribe, and comment below to keep the buzz going. Without further ado, let's jump right in.
Recommendation number 64 proposes to assist assistance with the removal of non-licensed firearms. I gather from the exchange from the Chief of Defense that the removal of non-licensed firearm is one employed through consultation of the provincial administration and the community. Is that correct?
Yes, and that's also one agenda that is always discussed in the National Security Advisory Committee.
Is that the only means of prescribed?
No, but Chairman and members, it depends on police as well and ourselves. When the troops are deployed, police also transfer police powers to the soldiers. But in areas of operations, PNG Defence Force members are restricted to go out full force without the presence of police.
Now, in these operations and gathering of these unlicensed firearms, what kind of firearms have you identified, ones that have been surrendered or been taken up in the hands of civilians?
Remember, I'll leave it to the Civil Defence Force to answer.
Thank you.
Sir, from factory made to homemade.
And where do you identify these sources to be from?
Those were when I was my presence in Hela province, and those that were surrendered.
Correct.
And some were kept at our forward operating base, which I physically had a look at it and touched these weapons, but I directed them to cut them up and destroy them.
Now, these weapons, is there a specific type? When you say factory made, what do you mean by factory made?
Shotguns, but M16s and other like Eastern Bloc weapons, I saw photos of them, but I did not.
Sorry, say that again?
Eastern Bloc weapon. These are like weapons, something similar to like AK-47s and all these, not the Western Bloc weapons. These are Eastern Bloc weapons. When the Eastern Bloc collapsed, these are the weapons, not out, moving around into countries like Papua New Guinea.
And where are these kind of weapons normally sourced from?
Confidently, I can tell you that it comes from the Western border.
Indonesia.
That's the Western border. And so if I could add, please. From what the secretary said, the surrendering of weapon, it's not only police and defense. We, like as I mentioned, through the councillors, through the LRG presidents, through sets groups, UN and other international organizations are taking a active role, especially in Hela and Enga, to see surrender of these weapons.
Now,
can I intervene? Given the delay in the appearance of the police commissioner, I want to call Mr. Kyle Saltmarsh and Mr. Julius Tassian from the RPNGC to please come take your seats so that some of these questions may be jointly responded to. And can you get the name tags also done? Thank you. You may continue.
yes. Thank you, Chief. Now, in this regard, therefore, what joint operations have we been planning or have been planned for 2027 illegal firearms disarmament? In preparation for a safe, fair, free election, you need the absence of firearms. Now, what steps, if any, has been conducted between the Defence Force and the police and the Electoral Commission at this point in time?
So regretfully none, but depends, we are doing our part at the border.
Do you think, as a responsible agency of enforcement, implementation of the law and order and security, internal security of the country and election purposes, that this would be the ideal time to start preparing?
That is correct, sir.
Thank you, Commander. You may remain seated and we'll come back to you. I just go to the RPNGC. First one is, I think, Mr. Saltmarsh. Could you just press the green button and for our record state your full name and your designation within the RPNGC?
Thank you, sir. Chief Superintendent Kyle Saltmarsh. I'm Chief of Staff to the Commissioner.
Thank you. Mr. Tassion, could you do the same, please?
I'm Assistant Commissioner Tassion. I'm the Assistant Commissioner Operations.
Thank you. Thank you very much. You can continue.
Thank you. I'll pause.
Okay.
I'll pause at that point for the time being.
So while we've got both of you, the senior officers within the RPNGC, you've obviously had the exchange. My first question, and that probably should go to you, Mr. Tassion. In terms of these recommendations, have you read these recommendations from the Special Committee on Elections, yes or no?
So I've got copies of the recommendations that specifically target the RPNGC. So I've got copies of it here.
Excellent. Now, coming to those questions that are specific to the, and again, these are similar questions to what we've asked the PNGDF. Have you developed any strategies or plans for the 2027 elections? And in terms of resourcing, have you started perhaps procuring those resources that you might need for 2027?
So we have initially started our planning, but it's still in its, we've already started procuring vehicles. We've started off with resources, started off with vehicles. So we have already purchased close to about 120 so far, which have been distributed to all the provinces.
And those vehicles will be used in the elections in 2027?
Yes, sir. Those vehicles will be used during the elections.
Okay. In terms of some of the questions that we've asked the PNGDF, and I come back to this issue of guns, because that's a key recommendation that is in our report. And again, this recommendation, let me make it clear, came from your own, I think, PNGDF and RPNGC. Recommendation 64 says that we recommend that the JSTF, which is, I think, both PNGDF and RPNGC, must plan for and remove all non-licensed firearms from the general public before the next general elections. Now, this is in response to the contribution from the former PNGDF commander and their assessment, which showed that non-licensed weapons, firearms within the ownership of members of the public, particularly up in the Highlands, are a serious threat to the conduct of elections up there. And so the recommendation was for joint operations between the two of you, the two organizations, to remove those weapons. Now, we've heard from the PNGDF commander, chief of defense, that they've done two such clearances for weapons. Now, from the RPNGC, are you doing similar work?
Yes, sir. We are doing practically as the commander has said. We're working side by side with the PNGDF, also with the local administration and the local leaders to try and have those weapons retrieved.
Could you tell us how difficult is it to, first of all, identify where these weapons are, and second of all, to actually go in and get those weapons? How difficult is it?
So it is very difficult in a sense that we must understand that the norm has changed. Now that some leaders of the Highlands, it is no longer, it is when you become a leader when you have weapons, things that you can force yourself to become a leader. Trying to get ourselves into those areas, it's pretty difficult. You know,
So
most times we face resistance.
So you are saying that the leaders themselves are arming their people up there?
You know, right down to village level, this level. So kind of a strong blow house man, sir.
Another question, are you saying that the leaders use weapons to determine their leadership status?
To a certain extent, sir.
And you're saying that's the norm?
It's a norm in most provinces, sir.
When you say leaders, who are you, what?
I'm not saying leaders, I'm saying leaders in the sense that online lo place. Village leaders, strong blow house mother, strong blow place. They use those weapons to defend themselves, defend their villages.
And so does the police and the PNGDF turn a blind eye to those things, or what's the practice? What's the...
No, sir, we've tried. We've tried trying to retrieve those weapons. Most times we face resistance by the locals, like the Commander PNGDF has said. Sometimes we face, repercussions. We have villagers shooting back at us.
So in terms of this recommendation, are you saying to our people that it's not going to be possible to remove the guns by the time 2027 comes around, or what are you saying?
It may not be possible to retrieve all.
Inspector Saltmarsh? I think.
Chair, thank you.
Sorry, did I get your, is it Inspector or
Superintendent.
Chief Superintendent, my
Thank you.
apologies.
Chair, thank you.
Yeah.
Chair, the normalisation of firearms in sections of the country is a significant challenge for the police and for our communities. We know this. Firearms are a tool that are employed and only useful for illicit means where ammunition is available. It's a two-part equation. The funding of ammunition is a significant concern for the constabulary.
Where is the ammunition coming from?
From
Cities?
Port Moresby,
Okay.
from societal elites who funnel and fund illicit weapons and illicit ammunition. That's a concern, and currently that is where our investigators are focusing.
What is the source of that ammunition? The source?
Sorry, sir, could you clarify the source?
Okay. You said that the ammunition comes from cities, from the elites. Okay. How do they obtain the ammunition?
That's a very good question, sir, and it's not straightforward. Ammunition, like firearms, comes across international borders. We know historically that there has been ammunition leakage from government stores, and over the last 4 years there's been significant tightening of those government stores. I'm pleased to say that RPNGC ammunition stores are acquitted. They are as tight as they have ever been. I can't say there's no leakage, but I can say it is a significant improvement on the last 4 years. We see ammunition purchased and sold in small-scale amounts from licensed firearms dealers, which is why the Commissioner has over the past 12 months tightened up significantly the policy around the licensing of firearms. It's very rare these days to see a firearm procured, whereas in years gone by, perhaps 15 years ago, there was more of a gun culture where people could acquire firearms legally. That's not the case now. The illicit funding of weapons and tribal violence, which is leading to scores of deaths over the last years, is something that the constabulary takes very seriously. And cutting off this crime type at the knees by stopping the funding is our current focus. At the same time, that's supported by our provincial efforts and efforts of SSD under Assistant Commissioner Tassian to remove weapons. But as the Assistant Commissioner has said, it's a very challenging operating environment.
Chief Superintendent Saltmarsh, if I may just jump in here and ask a quick question. Based on your intelligence, what are the numbers of unlicensed firearm in the hands of civilians?
I don't have that figure at my fingertips, I'm sorry, but I can take that on notice. I can say that the number of unlicensed firearms would be difficult to quantify, in that many of the firearms we see in the Highlands region are homemade, factory-made,
Well, if
as
I may,
opposed to factory-made.
it seems on the general perception is that you have a bit more factory-made than anything that looks like a homemade gun these days.
I don't think, sir, I would, with respect, concur with that. I think that factory-made weapons get headlines. They are there. We're all aware that they come across the border. But I would think it would be my submission that homemades are as equally as dangerous and they're as equally as prevalent.
So if I may add on, CDF rightfully mentioned hired guns. Most of these high-powered weapons or factory-made weapons are moving from province to province as hired guns.
Well, that was the concern we had when we were dealing with the earlier on in terms of our inquiries was that we were concerned that these weapons could be migrating from one location to another. And, we kind of saw that if they are going to migrate from the province, what's to stop them, for instance, being used in Morobe? You migrate all the way down there, or coming all the way to Port Moresby, or other areas where these weapons are less prevalent. And so, based on all of that, and again, this is when this report was written, we were concerned and would have wanted a strategy on how to get in there and remove those weapons. Not just because they pose a risk to our citizens every day, but because there was evidence that they could be used to determine the outcome of elections. There were several provinces when we did our inquiries up in the Highlands where the members of the RPNGC and the members of the provincial government requested that they not be interviewed by the committee. They requested that they could speak to us in confidence. So that was the reason why we came up with this recommendation, to deal with that issue, because it was guns that were in the hands of some of these communities that were being used to determine the outcome of the elections. But as you so rightly, as you know in your business, those guns don't just wait for the elections. In between, they are being used to, determine all kinds of agendas, not just election outcomes. And so it comes back to that question. And let me put it another way. What would it take for us to remove these weapons from these communities? What would it take? And is it something that you would make as a further recommendation rather than just having a blanket, just a broad recommendation that says go out and remove these firearms? What would you recommend? Because the elections are not so far off now. What would it take to remove all these weapons? What sort of support would both of your forces need, Chief Inspector?
Chair, I believe the use of firearms is best tackled by two mechanisms. The first is by cutting off the source of funding that enables the purchase of ammunition, the transfer of illicit firearms. More effective collaboration and more effective targeting of the finance.
Can I stop you there?
Please.
I just wanted clarification. Stopping the funding, what do you mean by that? It's pretty broad in itself. How do we stop the funding?
With respect to the electoral cycle, sir, more effective and transparency mechanisms around the use of funds that are associated with political campaigns during the electoral cycle. We have strong intelligence that indicates funds travel from regional centres to rural centres for illicit purposes. We don't see that just in the electoral cycle, but it's certainly pronounced. The second aspect, which it would be my view is essential in delivering upon the committee's very valid and very strong recommendation, is more effective community leadership in compelling positive behavioural change, in garnering strong community support that firearms are not an acceptable solution, they're not acceptable use, they're not acceptable to possess. What we see is a lack of grassroots community leadership in compelling positive behavioural change.
That's a pretty difficult recommendation, if you ask me. I mean, we accept that societies need to change and values need to change in order for these firearms to be less acceptable. But in the meantime, obviously we have an election coming up. The recommendations from your security forces, which we have taken on board, tell us that we are essentially waiting for a disaster in 2027 if we do not deal with some of these issues, firearms being, I think almost at the top of the list and firearms and ammunition, as you correctly put it. So again, we are looking for, behavior change is a long-term thing. That's going to take 10, 15 years. We have an election that's coming in 1.5 years' time that you have to be properly resourced and, of course, skilled to execute it safely and perhaps with less problems than we've experienced in 2022. Because I think that's what the community would like to see. Our people would like to see a free, fair, and safe elections. I mean, that's when we went around the country, that was the great desire of all Papua New Guineans, regardless of where they came from. They wanted to see free, fair, and safe elections. And it's a responsibility that we are expecting police, defense force, all of you to deliver for us. So how do we do that? For you to say the behavior change, we accept that, but we need solutions in the next 18 months.
Chair, I concur. In addition to those long-term shifts that I think we acknowledge need to occur and will take time, we need more effectiveness from our security forces. As we approach this very important electoral process, ensuring that communities are safe to exercise that democratic process is incumbent upon us as security forces. We need to step up and improve our information exchange. Not to say it's not occurring. There is always room for improvement, and being more effective in sharing information and receiving information from the community to know where these weapons are so that they can be removed. That's the first step. Having better engagement, which is where our focus is currently at this stage of planning, better engagement with communities to know where these weapons are so they can be removed.